Hello everybody, welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. For this video, I wanted to do something very bright. So I decided to do this airbrush swipe technique on the cake itself, and then I decorated with some pulled sugar and some edible silver leaf. So stick around if you want to see how this is done. Now, I don't always show this part of the cake decorating because I feel like once you've seen it, you've seen it, but there are quite a few new people here, so I will try to describe what I'm doing here. And what I'm doing is I am using marshmallow fondant, and I put some shortening into it, and I just incorporated that into my fondant. It's called conditioning, and what that is doing is softening your fondant and making it more pliable and easier to work with. And it also helps to prevent any cracking or elephant skin that you may experience. But honestly, with this marshmallow fondant, I don't seem to have that issue, and that's why I like it. And I will try to remember to put a link to the recipe for the marshmallow fondant so that you can make it too. So we're going to roll this out to about 1/4 inch thickness. And I'm using that silicone mat there. And for this transfer method, it makes it a lot easier. Just leave it on that mat and put a little bit of shortening on your ganache or crumb coated cake. Now my hands are clean and dry. You can apply this with a brush if you like. And remember that there's not so much shortening on it that you're going to taste it. It's going to absorb into your fondant. It just helps to get the fondant to stick. And I just put a rolling pin under the mat and transferred it that way, and then just release your mat. This way you're using less cornstarch, which doesn't seem to be an issue ever. I don't seem to have an issue with it, but just like with sugar cookies, I like to use the least amount of flour in sugar cookies, and I like to roll that out in a method so that they don't dry out as well. So anyway, just food for thought there, that if you are interested in using one of those mats, I will try to find a link for that also. And then I am just working it down from the top. I try to make sure that I get that top attached and rub any bubbles out that might be trapped in there. And then get your top edge secured first. Rub around the top edge to make sure that you're eliminating any chances of tearing, because the weight of the fondant, especially with these taller cakes, can cause some pulling and tearing. And then just continue to pull those pleats out and rub your fondant onto the cake little bits at a time as you go down towards the bottom. And then remove your excess off the bottom, and I'm just using my fondant scraper or smoother to push it up against the bottom. And then use your sharp knife, or you can use a pizza cutter if you want, to move excess up to the cake. And I cut it a little short of what I wanted, so I'm just using my fondant smoother to push that down to the board. And then I like to take a wadded up piece of fondant that I do dip it in a little bit of cornstarch and rub it on the cake. I find that helps to smooth it on the cake without creating any of those flat spots that sometimes you get with a smoother. And then I'm just rubbing that top edge, kind of butting those two smoothers together to create a sharp corner. And honestly, you don't need to use fondant for this technique, the airbrush technique. But since I'm decorating it with these Isomalt pieces, Isomalt can be a little bit heavy, and I find that they stick. You have less chance of them falling off if you do the fondant. And for this decoration, I did use regular Isomalt, the Lorans. I think I'm saying that right. I will put a link to that also. And a lot of times I make it from scratch, but since I wanted to pull it, sometimes the scratch recipe kind of hardens up a little too fast and becomes a little opaque as you work with it. And I wanted them to be transparent in the middle. Clear in the middle. And when I poured that on the mat, yes, you're supposed to use gloves. This Isomalt is very, very hot. I just have a lot of experience with it, so I know when to touch it and when not to touch it. But be on the safe side. Don't do as I do. Do as I say, not as I do. Get some heat-resistant gloves. Don't take the chance of giving yourself third-degree burns. And now that I have gotten that consumer alert out there, let's continue. I'm just using some food coloring, and that is AIRBRUSH. You don't have to use AIRBRUSH food color. You can use gel color if you want, but I wanted it to be the same color as I was using on the cake. And I just dipped my toothpick in it. I combined some pink and some red. I wanted kind of a bright raspberry color. And I just ran my toothpick around the outside edge before it started to set up. And it just kind of blends in as you're pulling the sugar. And I'm just starting on the outside edge, since that cools faster, and kind of pulling it and tugging it into just abstract different shapes. I needed to have the middle part kind of not so curved because I need something to attach to the cake. So most of the movement in these comes on the outside edges of the cake. And I am pulling that Isomalt out just a little bit. I was trying to get some pulled edges before I got my fingers in there, just kind of give myself a head start. And this one is the one for the top. I wanted it to have a little height and a little spot for it to sit on top of the cake. So you'll see how I did that in a second here. And it really wanted to stick to my mat. I really had to struggle with this one. But yeah, just take your time, make sure you're not hurting yourself. And if it starts to firm up, don't push it too much because you can crack it. And there is my topper piece. And I did go back in. And you can't tell from there, but my hand is further away from that flame, from the torch, than you can see. And it's sped up, so I am not touching it directly after I torched it. It was maybe 10 seconds before I touched it. And I just kind of wanted to soften it so that I could bend it into shape a little bit without breaking, because you can go back in and reheat a little bit when you need to move things. Now I let those cool for about 30 minutes and set up, and then I went in with this confectioner's glaze, my favorite tool, my confectioner's glaze, just to add a little shine and to seal them so they don't cloud over so fast. And make sure you get the fronts and the backs. And here I'm testing my color again. I do a lot of testing to make sure that my color range is where I want it before I spray it on the cake. And it's the red and the pink mixed together. And what I did was I just sprayed it on this is very simple. This does not take a lot of experience to do. Sprayed it on the very bottom, and then I just used that sponge and then a pastry brush to brush it up into the side. You could do it straight up if you want. Doesn't matter. The direction doesn't matter. It's whatever you want to do. And then just continue around the cake and do the same technique, just brushing it up. I just kind of wanted those tips of it to be a little bit more, what's the word? Just kind of airy, and have a look of movement, and be more abstract. You know me with abstract. Can't help myself. Yeah, and just to continue that around the cake, and you'll see that I do go back in and I airbrush again, because I don't want that bottom to be so see-through at the very end. I wanted it to be kind of more of a gradation. And I added more red on the very bottom, so it was a gradation of red into a raspberry. And this airbrush color gets absolutely everywhere. You will have to clean your kitchen 3 times. I promise. Unless you want to invest in a box that you can use when you're airbrushing to keep the airbrush inside the box. It's a whole system, but I haven't wanted to invest in that. But just go ahead and make sure that you get everything cleaned off, because you won't even see it, and then your counter will get wet, and then there it is again. And I just used a little buttercream to attach the Isomalt to the cake, and this cake had set up and cooled for a little bit, so you don't have to worry about it getting soft on you while you're attaching your Isomalt pieces. Just go ahead and set it in your fridge for maybe 20 minutes before you start doing this, and you will notice some condensation when you bring it out from the fridge, and that's fine, because as long as it's not sweating real bad, it might actually help your Isomalt stick. And I did use a little bit of piping gel behind some of these side pieces because I didn't want to see the buttercream behind the Isomalt piece where the airbrushing was. And I just used these toothpicks to anchor them, to hold them in place. And once you have got your toothpicks in there, got these where you want them, go ahead and just let it set up again in the refrigerator for about another 10-20 minutes. And then you can spin those toothpicks out. You spin them and pull them out once it has set up, instead of pulling them directly out, because you don't want to actually mess with your Isomalt itself. You don't want to pull on that fondant, so just spin it and release it. Then I went in with some edible silver leaf. I've done a lot of gold lately, and I thought I wanted to do a different metallic, but I have a hard time not doing any metallic at all. It's really hard. It hurts my heart when I don't put some kind of a metallic touch on a cake. I don't know why. But I'm just using my brush to attach it to the cake. Use a fluffier brush. Don't want to use a real small or stiff brush. It makes it just a little harder. So there you go, guys. The final result with my airbrush swipe cake with some Isomalt decorations and some silver leaf. I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope you get some inspiration from it. And please take the time to like, share, subscribe, and do all the things. I appreciate you watching my video. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.